The massive Alliance survey ship Stellar Seeker drifted through the darkness of deep space, its powerful scanning beams cutting through the void like bright ribbons. On the bridge, Captain Marcus Reed stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main screen with mild interest. His blue skin reflected the soft glow of the ship's instruments, antenna twitching occasionally as new data streamed in. "Another empty sector," he muttered, mandibles clicking in frustration. "Nothing but space dust and—" "Captain." The voice of his sensor officer interrupted his complaint. "We're picking up something large at the edge of our range." Reed straightened, his antenna perking up. "Show me." The main screen shifted, revealing a dark shape floating against the backdrop of distant stars. As the Stellar Seeker drew closer, the object's form became clearer. A ship, and a big one at that. Its hull was dark and scarred, bearing the marks of countless years drifting through space. "Scan it," Reed ordered, his interest growing. Finding derelict ships wasn't uncommon, but something about this one felt different. First Officer Tom Baker, the only human on the bridge, leaned forward at his console. His eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. "Sir, it's human in origin." Reed couldn't help but laugh. "Human? Out here?" He shook his head, antenna wobbling with amusement. "They barely had faster-than-light travel when they joined the Alliance 30 years ago." The scans continued, and more details emerged. The ship was roughly 300 meters long, with what appeared to be primitive chemical thrusters and basic armor plating. Ancient weapon mounts dotted its hull, looking almost comical compared to modern Alliance weaponry. "I'm detecting writing on the hull," Baker reported. "U.S. Thunder. It's an old Earth warship, sir." Reed walked closer to the screen, studying the derelict with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "Look at those crude weapon systems. They were really going to fight space battles with these things." He chuckled again. "No wonder humans were so eager to join the Alliance when we found them." Baker frowned as he continued analyzing the data. "Sir, I'm picking up some unusual energy readings. They don't match what we'd expect from a ship this old. Probably just radiation from its ancient reactor." Reed dismissed with a wave of his hand. "This thing belongs in a museum, not floating out here in space. In fact," a smile spread across his face, "contact Alliance Command. Tell them we found a perfect addition to the Historical Technology Wing." As the crew began preparations to tow the Thunder, Baker couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The energy patterns he was detecting were too regular, too structured to be random radiation. But every time he tried to focus the sensors on these anomalies, the readings seemed to slip away, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. "Sir," he tried one more time, "maybe we should have a human expert examine it before we move it. These readings—" "Officer Baker," Reed cut him off. "I know you feel some connection to this relic because it's from Earth, but it's just an obsolete warship. The kind your people used before you understood real space combat." He gestured at the Thunder with all four arms. "Look at it. Those armor plates wouldn't stop a modern mining laser. Those weapons probably used physical projectiles. It's admirable, really." The bridge crew laughed, and Baker fell silent. But as they attached the tow beams to the Thunder, he noticed something strange. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw lights flicker deep within the ship, like an ancient predator opening one eye to watch its approaching prey. The Alliance crew continued their work, joking about how their ancestors must have trembled at the sight of such fearsome human warships. They didn't notice how the Thunder's hull seemed to absorb their scanning beams a little too perfectly, or how its surface somehow deflected detailed analysis, despite its apparent simplicity. As the Stellar Seeker began its journey back to Alliance space with its prize in tow, Baker made one final note in his personal log. "There's more to the Thunder than meets the eye. I just hope we don't learn that the hard way." Behind them, the darkness of space swallowed their wake, and somewhere deep within the ancient warship, something waited and watched. and remembered. 2 weeks after the Thunder's discovery, James Wilson stood in the Alliance Museum's massive holding bay, staring up at the ancient warship. His gray hair and weathered face marked him as one of the older humans in Alliance space, but his eyes were sharp as they studied every detail of the vessel. "As you can see, it's quite primitive," Museum Director Krell said, his tentacles waving with excitement. "We're honored to have a human expert verify its historical details, though I assure you our scans have been thorough." Wilson walked slowly around the ship's hull, his hand occasionally brushing against the cold metal. To the aliens watching him, he probably looked like an old man lost in nostalgia. They didn't notice how his fingers found specific points on the hull, or how his eyes measured precise distances between what appeared to be random scratches. "Would you like to see our scan results?" Krell offered, holding out a datapad. "The weapons systems are particularly amusing. Physical projectiles. Can you imagine?" Wilson took the pad without comment, scrolling through the data. Every reading showed exactly what he expected them to show, exactly what the Thunder wanted them to see. "Tell me," Wilson said finally, "did anyone notice anything unusual about the energy readings?" First Officer Baker, who had stayed with the ship since its discovery, stepped forward. "Yes, I detected some strange patterns, but they were just radiation from the old reactor." Director Krell interrupted. "Nothing unusual for a ship of this era, though I'm surprised it had enough power to produce any readings at all." Wilson handed back the pad. "I need to make a call," he said quietly. "Excuse me for a moment." In a private corner of the holding bay, Wilson activated his secure communicator. The holographic display showed an older woman in a military uniform. "Admiral," Wilson whispered, "they found the Thunder." The woman's eyes widened. "Are you sure it's—" "Yes. Hull number matches. She's one of the original Ghost Fleet." "Has she shown any signs of—" "No. She's still sleeping. But they're poking at her pretty hard with their scans. I don't know how long she'll stay quiet." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Try to warn them. But remember the protocols. We can't reveal too much." Wilson returned to the group, where Director Krell was enthusiastically pointing out the Thunder's primitive features to a group of alien scientists. "Director," Wilson said carefully, "I should tell you something about this ship." "Oh yes, please share your historical knowledge. Was this considered a powerful vessel in its time?" Krell's tentacles wiggled with amusement. "This ship," Wilson chose his words carefully, "is more than it appears. In fact, I strongly recommend moving it to a secure facility for proper—" Laughter interrupted him, not just from Krell, but from all the alien scientists. "Secure facility." One of them wiped tears from their compound eyes. "For this antique, what do you think it's going to do? Shoot us with its gunpowder weapons?" Wilson felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice steady. "During Earth's early space age, we developed technologies that—" Yes, Krell patted Wilson's shoulder with a tentacle. "We know humans are proud of their history. But you have to admit, compared to modern Alliance ships, this is little more than a curious relic." In that moment, Wilson saw something that made his blood run cold. As one of the alien scientists ran a deep scan over the Thunder's hull, a faint pattern rippled across its surface, invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. The Ghost Fleet ships were designed to be underestimated. Their true nature was hidden beneath layers of deception, advanced technology masked as primitive construction. And the Thunder was one of the most sophisticated ever built. But trying to explain that to these laughing aliens would be pointless. They'd made up their minds about the primitive human warship. "Just remember," Wilson said quietly as he turned to leave, "appearances can be deceiving." Behind him, the Thunder sat silently in its berth, its hull reflecting the harsh museum lights. Deep within its core, complex systems monitored every scan, every probe, every attempt to understand its secrets. And somewhere in its ancient computer banks, a countdown had begun. The aliens had found their museum piece, But they hadn't found the wolf hiding in sheep's clothing. Not yet. The alarms in the Alliance Museum complex screamed to life at midnight. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors as security personnel rushed to their stations. In the main control room, Director Krell's tentacles twisted with anxiety as he watched the tactical display. "Report," he demanded, all four eyes fixed on the screen. "Crimson Dominion warships," the security chief answered, his scales pale with fear. "3 battle fleets just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our system." Wilson, who had refused to leave the museum after his inspection of the Thunder, stood quietly in the corner. He watched as more red dots appeared on the display, showing enemy ships approaching from multiple directions. "How did they get past our border defenses?" Krell's voice shook. "They didn't get past them," Wilson said softly. "They destroyed them." The tactical display confirmed his words as reports flooded in. The Crimson Dominion, notorious for their brutal conquest of primitive worlds, had launched a massive surprise attack. Alliance defense stations were going dark one by one. First Officer Baker burst into the control room. "The Alliance fleet is responding, but they're scattered. It will take hours for enough ships to gather for a proper defense." "Hours we don't have," the security chief growled. "The first wave will reach the museum in 30 minutes. Director Krell's tentacles drooped. "All our historical treasures, centuries of artifacts." "The artifacts aren't what they want," Wilson interrupted. His eyes were fixed on a specific part of the tactical display. "Look at their approach vector. They're heading straight for the military research complex next door." "The new quantum weapon project," Baker whispered. "If they capture that technology." Wilson straightened up. "Director Krell, I need authorization to board the Thunder." The room fell silent for a moment before nervous laughter broke out. "The ancient human ship." Krell stared at Wilson in disbelief. "What are you going to do with that relic at a time like this?" "That relic is sitting in a perfect defensive position." Wilson pointed at the display. "If it were operational." "It's a museum piece." Krell's tentacles whipped through the air in frustration. "Even if you could power it up, its weapons couldn't scratch the paint on a modern warship." The building shook as the first distant explosions reached them. The Dominion's advance forces were engaging the outer defense ring. "Sir," Baker stepped forward, "what do we have to lose?" Krell looked from the tactical display to Wilson, and back again. Another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for him. "Fine." He waved a tentacle dismissively. "Take whoever you need. Maybe you can at least distract them while we evacuate the valuable artifacts." Wilson was already moving. "Baker, with me. We need to get to the ship before they break through." As they ran through the corridors toward the main display hall, Baker looked at Wilson. "You know something about that ship, don't you? Something you're not telling us." "I know many things," Wilson replied as they reached the Thunder's berth. "And you're about to learn them too." The ancient warship loomed above them in the emergency lighting, its hull still bearing the scars of ancient battles. But as Wilson approached, something changed. The air around the ship seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot metal. Wilson pressed his hand against the hull, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a modern-looking control interface. "Impossible," Baker breathed. "Our scans never showed." "Your scans showed exactly what the Thunder wanted them to show," Wilson said as he began entering commands. The Ghost Fleet was designed to be underestimated, to be dismissed as relics until it was too late. Deep within the ship, long-dormant systems began to power up. Lights flickered to life in corridors that had been dark for decades. "Director," Baker called over his communicator, "you need to clear the display hall. Now." "Why?" Krell demanded. "What's happening?" The Thunder's hull began to hum with energy that no primitive warship should have possessed. In the distance, they could hear the Dominion's weapons getting closer. "Because," Wilson smiled as he pressed the final activation sequence, "this old wolf is about to show its teeth." Inside the Thunder's main corridor, Wilson moved with purpose, his footsteps echoing on metal that hadn't felt human presence in decades. Baker followed close behind, his eyes wide as hidden panels slid open at Wilson's touch, revealing technology that definitely wasn't primitive. Impossible, Baker muttered, watching sleek control interfaces emerge from what had appeared to be rusted walls. All our scans were fooled by the best stealth technology humanity ever created, Wilson said, reaching the bridge entrance. He pressed his palm against what looked like an old manual door lock. The entire wall shimmered and vanished, revealing a bridge that belonged on a modern warship. "Welcome back, Commander Wilson," a calm female voice echoed through the ship. Holographic displays sprang to life, filling the bridge with a soft blue glow. "It has been 43 years, 2 months, and 17 days since my last activation." Baker spun around, searching for the source of the voice. An AI. But human ships of this era didn't have. "Correct," the voice said. "They didn't. But I'm not from that era. I just pretended to be." Wilson settled into the captain's chair, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "This is Aurora, the Thunder's Eye, one of the most advanced ever created by humanity." Outside, they could hear explosions getting closer. The museum's defenses were failing. "Time to wake up, old friend," Wilson said softly. Full system activation. The ship's deck plating began to vibrate. Throughout the vessel, hidden machinery hummed to life. What had seemed like solid hull plates split apart, revealing weapon ports and sensor arrays that no amount of scanning had detected. In the museum's control room, Director Krall stared at his instruments in disbelief. "What's happening? The power readings from the Thunder are impossible." The ship's exterior began to change. The seemingly corroded hull rippled like water, decades of artificial aging falling away to reveal smooth, dark metal underneath. Panels shifted and realigned themselves, transforming the ancient warship into something altogether different. "Aurora," Wilson commanded. "Status report." "All systems operational," the AI responded. "Quantum core at 97% capacity. Shield generators online. Weapons primed. Ghost fleet protocols disengaging." Baker watched in amazement as more of the bridge transformed around them. "Ghost fleet protocols. A program designed to hide our true nature," Aurora explained. "We could make ourselves appear as anything. Derelicts, merchant ships, or in this case, an obsolete warship. The perfect disguise." Wilson activated the main tactical display. Red dots showed the Crimson Dominion forces getting closer. "Aurora, calculate firing solutions. Let's show them what a relic can do." "Sir," a panicked voice came through the comm system. It was Director Krall. "The Dominion ships are almost here. You need to evacuate that museum piece immediately." Wilson smiled. "Actually, Director, I recommend you evacuate everyone else. Things are about to get interesting." The Thunder's transformation continued. What had appeared to be primitive chemical thrusters revealed themselves as advanced quantum drives. Ancient radar dishes morphed into phase array sensors that could track a dust particle from orbit. "Warning," Aurora announced. "Crimson Dominion ships entering weapons range. They are charging weapons." Through the bridge windows, they could see enemy ships appearing in the sky above the museum. Their massive forms blocked out the stars, weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. "They haven't scanned us properly yet," Wilson noted. "They see what everyone else saw. An outdated relic." Baker strapped himself into a crew seat, finally understanding. That's why the Ghost Fleet was so effective. Nobody expects a primitive warship to be a threat. Exactly. Wilson's hands hovered over the weapons controls. "The best predator is the one you don't see coming." The first Dominion ship fired, its energy weapons lighting up the night sky. But the shots weren't aimed at the Thunder. They clearly considered the old human ship too insignificant to waste ammunition on. That was their first mistake. "Aurora," Wilson commanded, his voice firm, "disengage all stealth systems. Show them what we really are." The Thunder's hull blazed with light as its true form was finally revealed. In the museum control room, Director Krall and his staff watched in stunned silence as the primitive Relic transformed into one of the most advanced warships they had ever seen. Now, Wilson smiled. Let's teach them why you should never judge a book by its cover. The Thunder rose from its museum berth, its hull now gleaming with a dark, metallic shine that seemed to swallow light itself. Gone were the fake rust patches and battle scars. In their place was armor that made the most advanced Alliance ships look primitive by comparison. What kind of metal is that? Baker asked, watching through the bridge windows as enemy fire simply disappeared into the hull without leaving a mark. Quantum-shifted titanium, Wilson explained as he guided the ship higher. The armor doesn't just stop attacks, it transforms their energy into power for our systems. Above them, the Crimson Dominion fleet continued their assault, still ignoring the rising human vessel. Their massive ships focused their fire on the military research facility, unaware of the threat emerging below them. Enemy ships still categorizing us as non-threat, Aurora reported. Their targeting systems are classifying us as debris. Wilson smiled. Perfect. Aurora, reveal weapon systems. All of them. The Thunder's transformation wasn't finished. Across its hull, panels slid apart to reveal weapon ports that had been completely hidden before. But these weren't the primitive railguns and missile tubes the Alliance had detected. Instead, sleek energy weapons emerged, each one more advanced than anything the Alliance or Dominion possessed. In the museum's control room, Director Krall's tentacles went limp with shock as his instruments finally showed the Thunder's true readings. Impossible, he whispered. Those power levels, they're higher than our entire defense fleet combined. On the Thunder's bridge, Wilson activated the targeting systems. Holographic displays showed every weak point in the Dominion ship's defenses. Sir, Baker pointed at the tactical display. They're launching fighters. Hundreds of small craft poured from the Dominion ships, their pilots probably laughing at the idea of an ancient human vessel rising to fight them. Aurora, Wilson commanded, show them what point defense really means. Tiny ports opened all across the Thunder's hull, each one no bigger than a finger. Before the Dominion fighters could react, thousands of invisible quantum beams lashed out. Each beam struck with perfect precision, hitting exactly the right spot to disable rather than destroy. In seconds, every fighter hung dead in space, their pilots unharmed but their systems completely shut down. By the stars, Baker breathed. You didn't even scratch their paint. The Ghost Fleet was never about destruction, Wilson explained as the Thunder rose to face the main Dominion fleet. We designed our weapons to disable and contain. Anyone can build a bigger gun. We built smarter ones. Now finally, the Dominion capital ships began to notice the Thunder. Their sensors, detecting the sudden power spike, frantically tried to identify what they were facing. Enemy vessels attempting deep scans, Aurora reported. Their confusion levels are amusing. On the Dominion command channel, which Aurora easily intercepted, panic was spreading. What is that thing? A Dominion commander demanded. Where did it come from? The museum piece. Another voice answered. It's the human relic. But that's impossible. Wilson opened a channel to all ships in the area, including the museum. His voice rang with authority as he spoke. This is Commander Wilson of the U.S. Thunder, Ghost Fleet Special Division. You are facing a vessel specifically designed to combat forces that underestimate humanity. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot stop us. You have one chance to retreat. The Dominion ships responded by firing everything they had at the Thunder. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and graviton pulses all struck the human vessel at once. When the barrage ended, the Thunder hung unchanged in space. If anything, it seemed to glow brighter. Thank you for the power donation, Wilson said calmly over the channel. Now let us show you what humanity's primitive technology can really do. The Thunder's hull began to pulse with stored energy. In the museum control room, Director Krall and his staff watched in awe as the ship they had mocked as a relic prepared to demonstrate just how wrong they had been about humanity's capabilities. The real battle was about to begin. The Thunder moved like no ship its size should be able to move. It weaved between enemy fire as if the massive warship was merely a fighter, its quantum drives leaving trails of blue light in the dark space. "Multiple enemy ships targeting us," Aurora announced calmly, detecting 27 different weapon types. "None match our defensive capabilities." Wilson's fingers danced across the holographic controls. "Time to show them what we can do. Aurora, activate the phase web." From the Thunder's bow, invisible beams shot out in all directions. Where they crossed, they created a giant grid of energy that surrounded the Dominion fleet. "What are you doing?" Baker asked, watching the tactical display in wonder. "Creating the cage," Wilson smiled. "Can't have them running away before we teach them their lesson." The Dominion ships tried to retreat, but their engines sputtered and died when they touched the energy grid. They were trapped. "Impossible." A Dominion commander's voice crackled over the intercepted channels. "How is that relic doing this?" "Fire everything. Destroy it." The space around the Thunder lit up with enemy fire. Plasma bolts, energy beams, and gravity weapons all struck at once. But instead of exploding, the Thunder's hull absorbed each hit, growing brighter with each impact. "Power levels at 180% and rising," Aurora reported. "They're actually making us stronger." Wilson nodded. "Let's return their energy. Target their weapon systems only. No casualties." The Thunder's response was beautiful and terrifying. Hundreds of precise energy beams shot out, each one finding exactly the right spot on each enemy ship. Weapon ports melted shut. Shield generators went dark. Targeting systems failed. In the museum control room, Director Krull and his staff watched with their mouths open as the ship they had laughed at systematically disabled a fleet that had terrorized the entire sector. "How?" Krull whispered. "How did we not see what this ship really was?" "On the Thunder's bridge," Baker understood. "Because we wanted you to underestimate us. The Ghost Fleet's greatest weapon wasn't its technology, it was surprise. A massive Dominion dreadnought, frustrated by its useless weapons, tried to ram the Thunder." Wilson just shook his head. "Aurora, show them the mirror shield." The space in front of the Thunder shimmered. When the dreadnought hit it, instead of a collision, the massive ship found itself turned around, facing the opposite direction. Did we just redirect a ship that size?" Baker asked in disbelief. "Physics manipulation," Wilson explained. "The Thunder doesn't just absorb energy, it can bend space itself." The remaining Dominion ships, now weaponless and unable to escape, clustered together. Their commanders were shouting in panic over their channels. "This is impossible. It's just one ship. It was in a museum. How is it doing this? Retreat. We must." Wilson cut into their channel. "Your engines are disabled. Your weapons are gone. You are not going anywhere until we decide to let you go." As if to emphasize his point, the Thunder released a pulse of energy that shut down every system on every enemy ship except life support and communications. "Commander," Aurora said, "Alliance reinforcements are arriving. They're asking for situation report." Through the bridge window, they could see Alliance warships jumping into the system, ready for a massive battle. Instead, they found a Dominion fleet floating helpless in space, completely disabled by a single ship. "This is Command Vessel Starfire," an Alliance admiral's voice came through. What happened here?" Wilson opened a channel to everyone. "Alliance, Dominion, and the museum. The Thunder happened. You all thought humanity was behind you in technology. You thought our old ships were relics, worthy only of museums. Today you learned why we let you think that." Baker looked at the tactical display, shaking his head in amazement. Not a single life lost. Not one ship destroyed. Just a perfectly executed demonstration of power that no one had seen coming. "Sometimes," Wilson said quietly, "the oldest wolf has the sharpest teeth." The Thunder hung in space, its hull still glowing with absorbed energy, a silent reminder to never judge a species by what they choose to show you. 3 days after the battle, the Thunder sat in the center of the Alliance's largest military dock, surrounded by curious scientists and military officers. Its hull still gleamed with that strange, light-absorbing surface that had puzzled everyone during the fight. Director Krall stood before the Alliance High Council, his tentacles twitching nervously as he gave his report. We were wrong about everything. The ship we treated as a museum piece was more advanced than our entire fleet combined. The council chamber was packed. Representatives from every Alliance species had come to understand how they had been so completely fooled by what they thought was primitive human technology. Wilson stood calmly at the podium, facing the council. Behind him, through the chamber's massive windows, the Thunder floated in space, a quiet reminder of humanity's hidden strength. Let me be clear, Wilson began. What you saw was just one ghost fleet vessel. There are others, hidden throughout Alliance space, disguised as derelicts, cargo ships, and yes, museum pieces. Worried murmurs filled the chamber. Baker, now sitting in the front row, couldn't help but smile at the aliens' discomfort. This isn't a threat, Wilson continued. It's a lesson. Humanity joined the Alliance because we wanted friends, not because we needed protection. The Thunder revealed itself to save lives, not take them. The head counselor, an ancient being with crystalline features, leaned forward. But why hide such advancement? Why pretend to be less developed than you are? Wilson walked to the window, looking out at his ship, because history taught us something important. When a technologically advanced civilization meets a seemingly primitive one, it rarely ends well for the primitive society. So when we detected your ships approaching Earth 30 years ago, we made a choice. He turned back to face the council. We hid our true capabilities. We played the part of an emerging spacefaring race, and we watched to see what kind of neighbors you would be. And now, another counselor asked, why reveal yourselves? Because the Crimson Dominion proved that there are still threats out there. The Alliance is our home now, too. We will defend it. Wilson smiled, just not always in ways you expect. In the military dock, engineers were still trying to understand the Thunder's technology. Every scan revealed new surprises. The hull wasn't just armor. It was a single quantum-linked piece that could change its properties instantly. The weapons weren't just advanced. They broke several laws of physics that the Alliance had thought unbreakable. What happens to the Thunder now? Baker asked from his seat. She goes back to the museum, Wilson said, drawing surprised looks from everyone. But now that we know what it is, Director Krall started to protest. You know what it is, Wilson interrupted gently, but not what it might become. The Ghost Fleet's greatest strength is uncertainty. Tomorrow, the Thunder might look like a different kind of relic, or a merchant ship, or something else entirely. The head counselor nodded slowly. And we will never know how many more ships like it are out there. Exactly. Wilson's expression grew serious. Consider this a gift, the gift of humility. Never again assume that a species is primitive just because they appear to be. As if to emphasize his point, the Thunder's hull shimmed briefly. When it settled, it once again looked like an old battle-scarred warship from humanity's early space age. Director Krall shook his head in wonder. We're going to have to revise every historical record about human technological development. No, Wilson said. Keep the records as they are. Let future generations learn the same lesson you did. Sometimes the most powerful civilizations are the ones wise enough to hide their power until it's truly needed. The council session ended with a new understanding between humanity and the Alliance. As Wilson walked back to the Thunder, Baker joined him. Will we ever know the full truth about humanity's capabilities? Baker asked. Wilson smiled as they reached the ship. The hull shimmered and a hidden door appeared. That, my friend, is the point. You won't, and neither will anyone else. The door closed behind them, leaving the Alliance to wonder what other surprises their primitive human allies might be hiding among the stars.